Okay, so here we go. Good evening, everybody who's attending the session today. I think the book club has every reason to pat itself on the back for keeping the engine running for so long, for more than a year and 9 months, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, under the stewardship of Mohini and Satish. But this evening, I'm stepping in for them. And I think they too, no doubt, need to take some time off every now and again. So here I am. And to begin with, I need to confess that I have not read the book that is coming up for discussion this evening, The Diamond Cutter. But I must admit, I'm very curious about it. And the reason for my curiosity is the following. I briefly Googled the book this morning, and in brief, what I read was as follows. It is about the Diamond Cutter Sutra, which is an ancient text comprising of conversations between the Buddha and his disciple. But, and there is a but, and I quote from what I read, other Buddhist texts offer you a path to happiness. Geshe Michael Roach, the author of this book, offers a path to wealth. Now, this may be just part of the many things I read, but this attracted my curiosity. Roach, who, while being a monk, helped build $100 million business, demonstrates how ancient notions in the Diamond Cutter Sutra can help you succeed. And if you're in business, that means to make money, a lot of money. Drawing on lessons he had learned in the diamond business in which he had been, and years in Buddhist monasteries, Roach shows how taking care of others is the ultimate path to taking care of oneself, even especially in business. So this really attracted me as a bit of information about the book and about the author. So I found it quite provocative in its own way. And therefore, I really do look forward to its presentation this evening. Unfortunately, I don't have more information than you people do about our presenter, Sanjay Phadke, who is into technology, as I can see, in fintech, which I suppose would mean financial services and technology. But not just that, not just an author, not just an explorer, but also into health tech. So I would request Mr. Sanjay Phadke to say a little more about himself, a few lines more, and then begin his presentation. Over to you, Mr. Phadke.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Latika. I also found the book very intriguing, and that's why I, in fact, changed the book at pretty much last minute. I think Mohini has had a few very tense moments because of me, because I hadn't read the earlier book, which I was supposed to present, which was, by the way, called Weapons of Math Destruction.
Math Destruction.
So, it changed literally 2 weeks back into this book. And apologies if anybody had read the earlier book and we're expecting that. We will certainly have hopefully another opportunity to talk about that book, which also is very interesting. But I actually came across this book exactly 2 weeks back, and I was in fact talking to somebody in Australia, a gentleman called Saurabh. I don't know if he's on the call while it's midnight. Saurabh, are you there?
I am. Yes, I am. Hi.
Okay. So Saurabh is the reason for the change of heart, or change of book rather. And he's also going to back me because my learning of this book is as you will see towards the end of the presentation, literally few minutes old at the end, going into 2 weeks at the beginning. So thanks, Saurabh, first of all, for joining at such an unearthly hour. And I do look forward to your support. But if it gets too late for you, please feel free to drop off. I know it's well past midnight.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So a bit about me, as Latika mentioned. I think I've been an on and off participant in the book club. the last time I participated, I was actually presenting another book, which was Beginning of Infinity, which was written by David Deutsch, a famous physicist. I think some of you who were there might remember it was a very, very lively discussion. And I also had presented a book before. This was, I think, about 3 months back. And then about a year back, there was another book I had talked about, which was about, the living, what was it called? Immortality or living life forever, the biological aspect of it, the genetic aspect of it. I guess the first one went better than the second one. Second one, my screens were kind of going all over the place. And I was helped by some of the audience who were extremely interested in David Deutsch's book. And I can see Arpita there, who had come in to rescue then to talk about that book, which she had read much more than me. So a bit about myself. I'm basically an engineer by basic education, and then did MBA, and then have been in finance or was in finance for about 2 decades, and then into fintech for almost half a decade. I also wrote a book last year called Fintech Future, which kind of brought about learnings that I had in finance and technology and how they mold together. And I've started a health tech company founded with some very, very talented scientists, which is trying to understand how breath can help understand underlying health conditions, starting with diabetes, but eventually everything else as well, without having to prick fingers and other ways of, current methods. So I'm generally interested in a lot of, bringing together science, technology, engineering, culture, philosophy, and maybe art as well, though I don't really understand that too much, but that's a bit about me.
Thank you. That's quite wide-ranging.
Thanks.
So please take over, Mr. Phadke, and you can start your presentation.
Okay. I guess as Latika mentioned, this is actually a very, very interesting book because it fuses together two very unlikely areas, philosophy and religion, which is generally considered to be very arcane and very non day-to-day life. Having said that, I think we have lots of examples of that not being the case in India, at least, but at least globally, the way it's seen, these are business and philosophy or business and religion are orthogonal usually. So this book brings out, as the name suggests, diamond cutter, or if I remember the word correctly, it was Arya Vajra, which was the original name, and the various interpretations of that, like many other books of Buddhism over last 2000 years through Nagarjuna and other scholars, talks about managing success in business and life. Very, very interesting bringing together of unlikely neighbors, so to speak. So I will hopefully cover most of the book in about, let's say, 20 odd minutes. There are about 13 slides, including the title, so 12. And then maybe we can have a discussion. I don't know if anybody has read the book. Can I know if anybody has read the book?
No.
Okay. All right. So hopefully this discussion will make at least some read it, as the discussion with Saurabh made me read it. Hopefully that will be the real output from this session. So in summary, this is a book about using Buddhist principles to running a business. And as Latika mentioned, it's written by a guy who was at Princeton, did a fair bit of studying of Buddhist texts in living in a monastery, and then was sent back into the world of business by his teacher, saying that you need to really go back and live like anybody else. So he was supposed to not disclose his interests or his his real interests or his way of life, etc., etc. He was supposed to act like anybody else in the world of business. So he had an office in I think it was 42nd Street in New York, if I remember, and that's where they started. And eventually, he was one of the founding members of this team of a couple of Israeli Jews who came to New York to set up a diamond business. And our author actually became first or the second employee after having done a course in the diamond cutting business after having been told by his teacher to start that. And from that zero level, similar to the 0 to 1 book in some sense by Peter Thiel and so on, typical startup mentality. He actually made from 0 to $100 million sales over a period of a decade or more, rather. And he's really written about how the observing of the commercial success and the impact of that on everyone, himself, around him, as well as, more importantly, how should one really fuse these techniques into running a business, which again is very, very interesting, because many of us do run businesses or part of companies running or have been part of companies running certain entrepreneurial stuff and so on. So there are, as he says, essentially there are 3 rules in summary again. First is the business has to make money. So it is creation of wealth. Second, you obviously don't want to die while creating that wealth. So be healthy while doing it. And third is then at the end of it all, one should be able to look back with satisfaction. So what has been the meaning of it all is the really the last piece. And we'll cover these 3 rules. The first one far more in detail, but the next 2 as well towards the end. So first of all, obviously, while we talked about the religion and Buddhism and business, the name or the name diamond cutter or the relevance of diamond cutter was obviously not clear, right? And it's not kind of obvious how that comes into the picture. And that's something that the author describes at the very beginning, as well as how maybe even Buddha looked at it, is, diamond has certain very unique features. These features are essentially, it comes from practically nothing, right? Diamond comes from carbon, which is one of the most abundant materials. While obviously there is only certain specific processes that make carbon, which is abundantly available, into a diamond which is not so abundantly available and hence valuable. The diamond that you see in rough does not look like diamond at all. I mean, it looks as black and as gray and as anything that it can be. However, it has the hidden potential, and the hidden potential is because it can be perfectly clear, and if it is cut rightly or if it is seen through in a particular way, it can literally be invisible. So you could be standing in front of a diamond, let's say made, if one can imagine a glass though I think that will be worth billions of dollars. So maybe not the whole glass, but you could actually see through it in some sense. So it is, the potential is fully hidden though, when one looks at it in the mind or in the carbon. So is true about life, that every life, every person has hidden potential. The other bit is about diamond being the hardest material, naturally occurring hardest material. And there are a few others which, given the number of materials that keep getting invented, are probably marginally more harder. But amongst the most relevant materials that we know, diamond is the hardest material, as it can pretty much cut anything else. Nothing else can cut it, scratch it, whatever, etc. So from nothing comes the something which can be called absolute, right? So in some sense, from everyday things, or from things which could be pretty much non-descript, comes something which is very, very distinctive and very, very unique. And in any way, if one can call absolute, it is absolute in terms of the hardness. And third is, it obviously, as I mentioned, it arises from life around us. So there is certain similarities in the process of cutting, and the author describes that in ways as to how the process of diamond cutting and bringing it into a ring or other jewelry, the number of steps that go into it is very, very difficult, is a teamwork, is very grueling process. But it's sort of similar to maybe how one can build a life and build it to the from the hidden potential to the highest potential. So the whole idea of diamond cutter is to teach us how to see that potential in everything, in us, in people around us, in all forms, and so on, and then achieve the lasting success in life and in business. More specifically, business is something that is not anathema to this way of thinking. It is pretty much part of life. So in a sense, like I said, diamond cutter is for connecting business to spirituality, which in ordinary terms are considered to be separate, and hence it's quite unique. So at the start of the book, there is a story of a gentleman called Dhiru Shah. Now, Dhiru Shah is a...
Are you operating your PPT, because you're still on the blue color thing?
Oh, is it? Okay, I'm on actually the third page.
No, we are not able to see your the next slide. I think you're still on your blue color thing.
Okay, let me stop the sharing and come back.
Yeah, because if you go further, we won't be able to see what you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks, Farooq.
Yeah.
So can you see the slide now in a slide mode?
See the slide. If you want to quickly go to the first two slides, you can do that.
Yeah, sure.
Just go to the second slide. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah.
That one. Then the next.
Yeah, this was a summary. From nothing to $100 million, 3 rules: create wealth, be healthy, and create meaning, or look back with satisfaction. The diamond being the hidden potential and the connection to spirituality. So let me come to the third slide, which I was briefly talking about. So, Dhiru Shah is a reticent diamond merchant from Mumbai, but he's equally at home in New York, or in Navsari, or in Palitana, which is the holy place for Jains in Rajasthan. So, the author got some of his inspiration from people like Dhiru Shah and others that he met, who were able to fuse the ability to do the right business and live life the right way as well. And Dhiru Shah was, in that sense, very different from what he would have seen as typical businessmen while he was growing up in US, which are typically the sharp-suited sharks, if one could call them, which is how businessmen typically are seen to be. I think the wolf from the Wall Street is another image that comes for sharp businessmen. But the author contends that the greatest business people actually have a very, very deep inner capacity for a true spiritual life. So they really are not, the greatest business people. And I think there are enough examples of that in some sense who have created, true progress, both in US, in India, and in other places, rather than the short-term progress or the short-term successes. So Diamond Cutter is really for those people, and it comes directly from Buddha. And here is one of the excerpt in the book from Buddha, where he is talking to one of the key disciple, Subhuti, who's actually apparently a god in the form of a disciple. And Buddha says, listen now to what I speak and be sure that it stays firmly in your heart, for I shall reveal to you how it is that those who have entered well into the way of compassion should live, and how they should practice, and how they should keep their thoughts. So as Latika mentioned at the beginning of the summary that she came across, it is really working with other people and working with others that the compassion obviously comes from or shows up. And that's really how you would see further down in the book that that is really how there's a very nice way of connecting it all together. So one of the key dialogue that I came across in this at the very beginning of the book is about this concept of emptiness in Buddhism, and I must say that I understood it for the first time really after reading this book. Though I've done a course in Buddhism at a monastery, a 10-day course. I think I had understood then, but I must have forgotten, and it's kind of now come back. So it's this dialogue between Subhuti and again Subhuti and Buddha. Subhuti asks, "What shall we call this book?" And Buddha says, "Call it the perfect wisdom." And Subhuti says, "How shall we think about the book?" And Buddha says, "Think of it as perfect wisdom. And if you're wondering why, it is because the perfect wisdom I'm writing about, and this is a bit of a tongue twister or brain twister, is the perfect wisdom that could never exist anyway." And that's exactly why I've decided to name the book Perfect Wisdom. And by the way, Subhuti, were you thinking that a book was a book? Right? And this is actually an imaginary dialogue by another commentator, a Tibetan. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. So Subhuti says, yes. Subhuti responds, "Not at all. We know you never write books." Right? So the key part about this is about the concept of emptiness. There is nothing inherent to anything. There is nothing inherent to a book. There is nothing inherent to a perfect wisdom. Everything is a label, and as we'll kind of look ahead, everything has potential. So the potential is hidden, is limitless, and by itself, there is no quality of good, bad, desirable, undesirable, and so on and so forth in anything, whether it's person, whether it's book, whether it's any other thing or a non-thing. So moving on, essentially, this is the concept of emptiness, and emptiness means that everything has a hidden potential in some sense. So that is the most important connection. And the hidden potential means it has the fluidity to become something else and to become what it can be. So Buddha explains further in Diamond Cutter, why is it so? Because the ones thus gone have stated that these perfect worlds that we work to make could never even exist. And this is exactly why we can call them perfect worlds. And again, bit of a brain twister. But what it's really trying to say is that what we call a book, and the author gives different examples of everyday business transactions, purchasing a building, for business that's increasing, or finding somebody in the team who's, as you say, is pain in the butt right there, who sits next to you at work and so irritating soul. None of them, nothing comes from that particular thing. It actually comes from, good, bad, ugly. It literally comes from something which is inside us, and that US is us, actually, not US. So it's really, everything is blank, everything is neutral, and in some sense empty, as Buddhists would call it. Yet we experience some things as good and some things as bad. So if it's not coming from the thing, because the same person appears different to different people, the same experience has different interpretations and different minds at the same time, and so on and so forth. There are millions of examples that one can take. So where does that quality that we ascribe to everything, to person, to a movie, to a play, to something that we are ourselves acting in, or so on and so forth, where does that come from? And that really comes from inside us. And that inside us is really the most interesting part of that book. And I would sort of say it's probably the science part of this book, which I found the most interesting as well. And that inside us part is what is generally described as karma. The author describes it as a mental imprint, which is continuously sort of taking imprints. Think of a tape recorder, video tape recorder that is continuously taking, continuously acquiring data or signals. And so it's really, our perception of the world is, so the key thing is our perception of the world is what makes the world as we perceive. This is my statement, not from the book, but this is how I perceived it. So, I hope I'm confusing you enough. That was the objective, but yeah. So the idea is the mind is all pervasive. So the author talks about how the mind can extend in space, in time, meaning that we can think about things which are, 100 feet from here, mind has reached there, past, future, mind has reached there, and so on. So he imagines it like a film, and the film has the thoughts as the content. So the thoughts, deeds, obviously, are continuously being written on that. And then there are certain amplifying factors. Emotions provide the amplification. So, how you feel, how it becomes very, very critical and important. And the intent determines the depth of the print, or the depth of the, there's a concept called vasana in Indian spirituality, I guess. So it's like the channel, and the depth of the channel is the intent. So making the right imprints is like cutting and polishing a raw diamond into the best in the world. And it starts with nothing. There is hidden potential, and then all these imprints make it either the most ideal, the best, or not. And think of the speed at which this data is being acquired, right? So these images, and this is from the book, by the way. So it says there are 65 images or imprints that are being made in one finger snap, according to Buddha. So imagine the level of deep understanding that was already there a few thousand years back. And according to the latest research, earlier people thought that finger snap takes a second. Latest research shows that finger snap is actually the fastest acceleration in human body, and it takes 7 milliseconds. So it's literally 20 times faster than blink of an eye, which was considered to be the fastest, movement in body. So blink of an eye is 150 milliseconds, whereas this is 7 milliseconds. So that translates to roughly like 10,000 data points per second, which is what are being acquired by this, mind or brain. Brain and mind obviously are different, but I'm just using the modern way of looking at it. So 10,000 per second, and these all imprints in motion is like the movie or continuous movie or the illusion, however you say, of life. As the movie keeps gathering, and this movie has been playing since the time we were born, and probably before as well, and the movie has been gathering imprints. The earlier ones keep gathering more strength at an exponential rate. So there is a roughly doubling in month, similar to a seed turning into a big tree over time. So there is a time factor, and of course there is an emotional and the intent aspect that like I mentioned above. So how does this all sort of come together, right, or bubble together? So there are these imprints, right? There are imprints that are continuously being collected by us, and those imprints are essentially being either called to the surface, because most of these are in subconscious. Obviously, we don't know that we are acquiring so much of information. Obviously, we have no clue. So all that is going into subconscious, getting stored somewhere in some way of storing that we'll probably never be able to fathom. But parts of those come up to the surface, and that's really the equivalent to a seed of an imprint, a flower. The flower is the seed has gone into the earth, and the tree of life has come. So the subconscious has the repository of the imprints. The stronger ones essentially bubble up on top, and that's like a control tower at the airport, which has many planes in the hangar, and some are called to the runway for the takeoff, right? And maybe some come by themselves, or they're called by the control tower. So essentially the stronger ones bubble up, and those stronger ones are the ones which we ourselves make happen and call. And that's what makes the difference between the good or the bad or whatever we call a particular experience. Going back to the earlier slide, is literally what we create. So we are creating that experience, or we are creating that imprint over a period of time by ourselves. And we think that it's something that happens at the moment and so on and so forth. Whereas in reality, it was something that was set in process long back, unknown to us. So in some sense, there are 4 rules of this process, according to the book. First is good imprint will color positive, and bad will likewise color negative. So while there is nothing good or bad in absolute terms, something done with good intentions will have a positive vibe, and that positive vibe will create a positive experience at the end of it. And similarly, the bad. Second, a smallest of the imprint gets huge, and I'm using a financial term called compounding for that. But essentially, even a relatively minor action, if undertaken with a conscious awareness of how the imprints make us see an otherwise neutral or empty world as we do, will lead to tremendous results. So there is emptiness. We are putting a conscious action there, which is a relatively minor action, which could be, maybe helping out somebody in need, something which is really minimal, which has no bearing in the overall scheme of things. Let's say for us individually as a person, in our in our time or in our financial sense or whatever. So it's a minor action, but if it's undertaken with a conscious awareness, it can sort of become huge, because it takes time, it keeps building, it keeps compounding with the right emotion. So the next rule I found to be the most interesting and important, which is that nothing happens without imprint being there first. So there are various rules, various theories, right, about the world around us. Is it really random? Is there a method to the madness, and so on and so forth? So this essentially says that everything that happens has a reason and there's a cause, and hence that without that cause or imprint having been there first, nothing would happen. So whatever is happening now, right now, has a reason why it's happening. Nothing is random, and so on. And the last being that no imprint is ever wasted, however small. So those 10,000 imprints per second, imagine, none of that is wasted. So how does this all relate to business, right? So one example, and there are many others, but one example that the author takes is, for example, there are times when businesses go through a rough patch and there are financial difficulties. And in typical American way of managing this, that usually leads to cut downs in all forms, right? And cut downs in people, cut downs in perks, cut downs in many things. And in a way, what it means, according to author, is it actually leads to cheapening of the outlook of life, which should not be done. And according to the author, money is created actually by maintaining a generous state of mind. And that's again a very unique statement, that money is obviously virtual, but it literally gets created by a state of mind, and this is for individuals in business. So the author has talked about many business problems which can actually be solved by careful replanting, in some sense, of those imprints, or the seeds in the garden, or the temple of mind, as one would want to call it. What that requires is to find correlation to what one sees outside. So what is being already expressed, there are problems, there are issues. So what are those issues versus what could be causing it, in some sense, from past imprints. And this obviously requires a lot more study and a lot more analysis and knowledge. So the author has given 46 typical business problems, from very day-to-day mundane problems to very deep problems about competition, about the very nature, very consistency and profitability of business, and so on and so forth, or the team coming together or not coming together, and so on and so forth. So those typical business problems have been actually interpreted in terms of what is it inside that needs to change, and what is inside the individual or me that needs to change for the problem to get sorted, and in some sense, the problem to disappear. And that could be, the problem could be having an irritating teammate, to having the draw of the the being in the worst industry where there is too much corruption, or not being able to come up with the right product at the right time, or having a regulator who always is clamping down. So literally anything and everything which is day-to-day business issues, problems for individuals, teams, owners of businesses, and so on, have actually been interpreted in terms of what are those imprints which are causing that, or which could be causing that. And if one changes those imprints by conscious action, then the output will be different. So you will literally create your own future, imprint by imprint, bit by bit. I added there, or block by block, in the modern way of looking at it, which is like a blockchain. Only thing is you're changing in some sense, while the understanding of blockchain is that you can't change the past. Here you're actually changing the future by changing your present in a very, very systematic way. So by changing things, you can create your own future, and that is essentially what creates wealth. So that was about the rule 1, which was about building wealth, not having the problems that usually come about, and then building the future in some sense. So this is a transition from the first rule, that is build wealth, to build health, which is the second goal. So this really is more of a toolkit that the author describes, which is generally applicable to all aspects of life, not just business, but individual success as well. And the key sort of assumption there, that given that everything has hidden potential, and given it's really our imprints that make it, that potential gets achieved or otherwise, one has to really start systematically building for that success and building for that future. So there are a set of techniques that have been provided, and one of those techniques is essentially creating a system to track those imprints. As I mentioned, given that lots of these things are happening subconsciously, we don't necessarily have a way to understand what's going on unless we can track it in some way. So there is this tool called Tundruk, which is the Tibetan term, which talks about keeping a book or a planner and updating it 6 times a day with certain specific problems that need to be solved, and then connecting them back to what needs to change. And that what needs to change could be being more compassionate, for example, to a coworker, or the mailman or the milkman, or whatever it is, and that gets tracked through the day. So all those acts or acts of truth are noted down duly in that, and in some sense you have a way to know what is going inside to be able to affect what will happen later, because those imprints will get called at the right time, or they will bubble up. The other technique is kind of in some sense well known across many different disciplines, is about starting the day with a silent time at the beginning of the day, half an hour or so. And interestingly, breath is central to many of these meditations and so on. So this one starts as well with breath, and it starts with 10 breaths. But the interesting part is the breath counting is actually the exhaled breath first, and then the inhaled breath. Usually it's in and out. The imagination is that you imagine yourself to be at the nostril, and you observe the breath going in and breath going out, and the qualities, temperature, the moisture, etc., and feel that, etc., etc. What this book says is you should do the first outward and then inward to really, which I found quite interesting. And in some sense, then after that, plan the day in advance, and that could actually start from the night before, and think about what imprints you're going to put through the day, which are deliberately, in some sense, planned and made to happen. So in a way, this is like gardening. Gardening, instead of gardening plants, it's gardening of imprints in a very careful fashion, day in and day out, day in and day out, and then the benefits starts accruing or showing up by themselves. So then comes the goal 2, which is health. I think I'm almost 20 minutes done. So this is going to be last 3 slides. So the goal 2 is about health. So obviously, what is wealth worth if it does not have the right health as well? So there are 6 mental afflictions that one needs to guard against, and I found this similar to the concept of Shadripus, those slightly different in the details. But the key part is that the diamond cutter and other books of Tibetan Buddhism talk about how these cause physical, or how these affect physical health on an hour-to-hour basis. So it's, obviously being angry, we know, will lead to a quickening of heartbeat and sort of fastening of the breath rate and so on and so forth. But how does that really impact longevity, and how does that impact graying of the hair, for example? It's something that the book talks about. So what it says is that one has to really guard at all times against creating new imprints, and in some sense, and the new imprints come because while we can control what we will do, we can't control what others will do. So you will get into situations which a boss will shout at a subordinate because something went wrong, for example, and that's something that the subordinate cannot plan for. Obviously, he could say that it happened because of past imprints, but at that time the choice is obviously to do something which does not create new imprints. And there is a very good example that Buddha gave of one of his earlier lives, where he remembers being cut organ by organ by a king, because he was in a jungle. The queen's wife was also passing through the jungle, and Buddha in that life was also a meditator, and he was meditating. The queen wanted to ask him questions. The king came on his hunting trip and saw and thought that something is going wrong, and then wanted to punish Buddha, as in his earlier life, and he started literally cutting his organs one by one after being angry. And Buddha talks about how he did not how he did not create a new imprint at that time. And that's really something radical, by saying that really he thought that while his hand was being cut, for example, it was not him, he was not the hand in some sense, and so on and so forth, right? That was the way. And he ensured that he did not create a new imprint, because if he had become angry and he would have wanted to teach him a lesson or whatever, that would have created a new imprint which would have bubbled up later to get a similar experience again in future. So all actually one gets is in that instant 3 seconds, because that's the time that one gets to decide the response. And imagine, and taking the same example of a boss shouting at subordinate for something that the subordinate did not do, and the author takes an example of ordering 1,000 carats of diamonds, is what the boss thought, or rather the boss said, but he thought that it was 10,000 carats, and he acquired all those diamonds, and now the boss is shouting at him, and now he has 3 seconds to sort of decide and not to feel all those 6 mental afflictions, which could cause one problems for others, but more problems for himself on the health front as well. So the author talks about unleashing creativity through silence and contemplation, and there are certain specific practices that he's talked about. One is called a weekly circle, which talks about a day every particular day in a week, which is spent in silence and contemplation, and there is a way to spend that day. And I know that Saurabh actually does every Wednesday a very unique thing, which I would like him to talk about as well, if possible, right after I finish. And he's written a book on that also called Wednesdays, if I'm not mistaken. So, that day a week, and the author talks about Wednesdays as well for some strange way. Maybe I think Saurabh must have read the book and then decided his Wednesdays. Second is a concept called forest circle, which is to spend 2 weeks at a stretch, again in silence and contemplation and in a structured way to minimize the contact with others and at the same time create success, create future success, and unleash that creativity, which makes brilliant things happen in business, new strategies, new ways of doing things, which were never thought about before. And that's, I would connect back to something we keep talking about in today's world called innovation. And also he talks about how every problem can be actually opportunity. So every problem is an opportunity seen differently. So he talked about how that same instant where his boss was breathing down at his neck for having got 10,000 carats of diamonds when he was looking for 1,000 carats, how that was converted into an opportunity by the author by creating certain unique new designs which required a different way of using those many more diamonds than what they had, and in the end creating a far more powerful new business idea than was there, all because he did not give in to those 3 seconds, and he turned the problem into an opportunity. And that again comes back to the ultimate meaning of emptiness or potential. So in some sense, whatever is happening is you can make it whatever it you want it to be by looking at it as an opportunity in some sense. And then the penultimate slide about how does this all connect to the step 3, which is looking back at life and looking back at the meaning of it all. And this relates to having made money, having maintained health, was it really worth it? And that requires a practice which is called death meditation, which is fast forwarding life and seeing how the life looks at that time, and where it comes from is realizing that everything that starts has to end. And whether it's uniquely, whether it's life, whether it's company, and Buddha actually talked about the end of religion as well, or Buddhist religion as well. And in some sense, so effectively he's saying that whatever starts can and may end. And the reason why he says is this small thing on the side, which talks about how one needs to learn to see that everything brought about by causes is like a star that is fleeting, a problem in your eye which does not let us see properly and distorts reality, a lamp which is an illusion because once the lamp is gone you will not see, the dew because it will, or bubble because it will burst and it will not be the same, or a dream, or a lightning because again that is not going to sustain, that's not real, that's not permanent, or else a cloud. So the concept of impermanence, which is very key to Buddhism, really talks about then how does one, create meaning? How does one drop things that are not important, looking backwards, and create really instinctive attraction to those things of human life that have the greatest beauty and meaning, rather than a lot of fluff that all of us or many of us engage in during the course of our lives, day in and day out. And hence, then the last bit, which is about ultimate management tool, again coming back to business terms in some sense, there are three specific steps to realize that, to reduce and in a way become one with everything. First is to observe, learn, and focus on others. And I guess this can start in teams, in homes, in in friends or whatever. All one does is to look at others. What do they like? What do they prefer? And then try to deliver that in some sense. And the author takes an example of somebody who was a young lama who used to welcome anybody who would come, and he was in New York as well, and who would welcome anybody coming into his house, and then in a few minutes realize what that person liked just by looking at what his eyes were looking at, whether it was coffee, whether it was which type of food, and so on and so forth, and then just deliver it next time without being asked, right? And they just do it for everybody who comes, right? In some sense. So the observe, learn, and focus. Second is, interestingly, exchanging self with others. And that's about seeing yourself from others' perspective. And we, in a way, keep talking about this all the time, put yourself in somebody else's shoes and so on and so forth. But this, the author terms as switching bodies. And here, really, he's giving an example of a new guy who came to work for them, who he could see in his eyes, in some sense, that while he was very happy to start working, he wanted to do something else. And then only because he could put himself in the other person's body, and then he said that, why don't you join me tomorrow morning in my cabin? And then apart from the sorting diamonds job, which was the expected original job, gave him the job of learning computers, which he realized was what really that guy was interested in. And then he became one of the, without having ever learned anything about computers, became one of the best programmers in that firm, and then remained a happy, loyal sort of employee for a very, very, very long time. So that happened because of this concept of exchanging self with others, seeing oneself through eyes of others. And I know this is extremely challenging, but I'm going to try it for sure. And third is something which is even more complicated, and that is about something called rope trick. And rope trick is imagining that two people become one. So you are standing next to a person. First, you observed what the person was doing, and you understood the person, and so on and so forth. Second, you looked at, as in step two, looked at yourself from the other person's perspective, and in third, you merge the two together. I'm still kind of discovering how this happens, and this is literally the last chapter of the book, which as I said, is half an hour old for me, and so it's still kind of dawning on me. But I hope Saurabh, if he's still there, maybe can answer any questions, especially on this bit if they come. And
I'm very much here. Thank you.
Sorry?
I'm very much here following you.
Oh, okay, thanks, Saurabh.
Would you like to stop sharing your screen, Sharad, Sanjay?
Yeah. So I think as the last bit says, the real source of wealth, or the economics of limitlessness, which is about win-win-win. Everybody wins. There is no limit.
Have you described what is the rope trick?
Yeah, I described as I understood it, but yeah, maybe sort of the.
Saurabh, you can take over.
Sure. Good evening, all. I won't come on video. Maybe I can just do a flash
Yeah.
because it's 1 a.m. here, and I don't think I'm a very pretty sight at 1 a.m. But
You're
that's
a
me.
You're a pretty side, don't worry.
You look like it's morning.
Okay, Saurabh, continue.
Thank you. No, the rope trick was, I haven't read Dhammakara for a little while myself, but I think it's just the, I think it's just, is it the snake one? Is it mistaking the snake for the rope, Sanjay?
No, actually, it's I will post it actually. It's about enveloping yourself with the other person and thinking the two of you are.
Oh, the lasso
one.
one. Yes.
The lasso one,
yes,
correct.
yes.
The lasso, yeah.
Yes,
Just
yes.
put
Okay,
the rope
yeah,
around
yeah,
the two people and build.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I'll just wind. First of all, thank you, Sanjay, for for a thorough presentation. Having recently read the book, I read the Dhammakara probably 15 years ago. It has certainly molded my entrepreneurial ventures since in a very significant way, I have to tell you. And you're right, I wrote a book called My Wednesdays, From Death to Life, that was published 2 years ago. And that was about the day I spend, my Wednesdays that I spend, which I call my circle day. What goes around comes around. So I spend the day very much in the way that the author has recommended in the book. There are periods of meditation, there are periods of volunteering and giving back to the community. There are periods of working on a particular skill. In my case, it's Hindustani classical music. And I can tell you, it's been a refreshing, midweek activity. But invariably, I also find that some of my best ideas in business come on that day, as I give myself the time to remain still and to remain disconnected from the cut and thrust of the day-to-day businesses. So I'll probably leave it at that. It's I cannot overemphasize. I think the import of these teachings and how consistent they are with Vedantic teachings, with Christian teachings. I have studied quite a bit of these doctrines and ideas and philosophies. I have a very long-standing meditation practice as well, and I think all of these are quite consistent. But Sajay, I think you said it very well in the beginning. The extent to which karma, we all understand karma, but the extent to which it applies in moment by moment is the really surprising aspect of what is presented in this book. I'll pause there.
Yes. Can I take over?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to both of you for Mr. Farke for presenting the book and for having told us what it has meant to him and how it has changed his life. But I would like to ask Mr. Farke right away that, first of all, is it a difficult book? Is it convincing? Have you been convinced by the argument it presents? Because I find it interesting, more than interesting, that a book on ancient Buddhist wisdom should be presenting us with strategies for success that are both personal and professional. So I find it a little, raising my eyebrows. Were you convinced by the argument given by Michael Roach?
Yeah, I would say so, actually. And like I said right at the beginning in my presentation as well, we all consider these things to be not really intersecting, orthogonal or whatever. But I think there is a hidden, I do realize there is a hidden meaning or connections in things. We haven't really fully understood the nature of how these things connect, but I think the book brings out many more layers of that than what I had thought before. I would think there is, eventually there will be a very strong logical way of understanding these things that may emerge. I don't know, it might take decade, 2 decades, 5 decades, I don't know, but I think there's a very strong, I don't know whether to call it belief, but I actually feel that it has a very, very strong foundation.
Because, for someone not having read the book, I mean, I found that there was paradox here. The paradox was, on the one hand, there is emptiness that you speak about. And on the other hand, there is self-consciousness in the way you prepare for your day, maybe even the night before. So everything is thought of. And you're always thinking of what I should do to improve it. Even the word imprint, which you have used many times, I haven't fully understood whether it's information or memory or knowledge or what kind of seed it is. So I think it takes much more than, a summary of a book to understand what this is. It has certainly given me an idea, what you have told me. But to understand what Michael Roach is trying to say, to talk of emptiness and success at the same time, emptiness and win-win-win at the same time, seems to me very, very paradoxical.
Yeah.
May I respond to that? Sanjay?
Yes, please.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. The first thing I'll say is that, look, before I was an entrepreneur, I spent some years working as a management consultant, a strategy consultant. I would consult to large organizations on tricky business matters. When we expand into this country, should we do it as a joint venture? Should we do it as a direct entry? Should we do it as a license? And for every company, you could bring in any kind of management theory. And it would apply to one in one situation, but not to another in another situation. So management theory, business theories have that nature that they're not entirely, they're not like theories of physics. I can assure you, though, what is presented in this book, and particularly the 46 common business problems that have been encountered, have been enumerated, and what are the underlying causes going on in our own minds that are forcing us to see our reality in that way, and what are the remedies to that? They are 100% applicable to any person facing that situation. And I know that from my own practice. I know that from 15 years of counseling, recommending others, and pointing them out, pointing them to the way out of their own problems successfully. I must add too. And when you say emptiness, I mean, obviously the word is itself quite loaded. The emptiness here that's being talked about is that anything that happens in life essentially is a set of random events, but the way that the random event impacts you is because of these imprints that are inside of you. And that, as Sanjay described, each moment an imprint is flowering. I think best to consider it like a seed. So whatever has come in has been sown as a seed. That seed germinates and it matches itself with a random event, and that random event now becomes a good thing for you or a bad thing for you. And that same random event could be if it's good for you, it could be bad for somebody else. It makes perfect sense that way.
I was reading some comments on the book, and one I thought was particularly interesting, and that was that the book spoke about spiritual materialism, apparently, according to someone, who said that the author provides a number of very specific inner and outer behaviors that will supposedly and magically change reality to fit a person's particular desires. Now, I don't know how you would interpret this, but spiritual materialism, I really feel that this is what the book could be held to be. There's the spirituality part of it, and you're using that spirituality part of it to improve a sense of your dedication, your profession, getting others along with you, giving compassion, understanding others, like that monk who understands the person by looking at his face and next time gives him coffee. All of that comes together, could be spiritual. At the same time, it allows you to have a win-win successful life. Would that be a correct interpretation? Or it would be too frivolous?
So, Sanjay, do you want to take that, or shall I?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So Latika, a dear friend of mine who actually lives in Pune. His name is Nitya Shanti. He used to be a Buddhist monk as well. I think he puts it quite eloquently. He says, everything is perfectly as it should be, and yet everything can be perfectly improved as well, joyfully improved as well. And that, I think you hinted at that paradox, and I think it is. I think you're right. This is a paradox. The world does not need us to be a better place or to function. Trust me, we are nothing and nobody in the world to matter really in any way. What matters is that we we are here for whatever inner purpose, and that I feel like from a Vedantic perspective, connecting with the joy that is within us, Satchit Ananda, is the purpose of life. And whatever it is that we do on the outside, if it allows us, enables us to connect with that Ananda, then that is the purpose served. So I think spiritual materialism, yeah, the world is there. It's we have physical bodies. We live in a physical world. Yes, of course. And if there is a choice, why live in a difficult circumstance? Why not live in a better circumstance? And if that happens to be by doing things which give me innate joy, then all the better, I'd say.
I have questions, but I would like to ask others if they have questions, and you're free to ask.
I have a question, if I may. Sanjay?
Yes, please.
Please introduce yourself, ma'am.
Hi, this is Arpita.
Yes,
Thank you for the beautiful summary, Sanjay. I wouldn't have. This is not a book I would have ordinarily picked up, but like Latika ji said, it sounded intriguing because it speaks of potential paradoxes. To have a spiritual approach to something that is essentially material business was very intriguing to me. I haven't read the book, so forgive my question if it's very naive. You spoke of imprints that we have, imprints that we carry from, whether we call them karmic patterns, etc. But those can be changed with conscious action. And when we, and then you garden the mind very carefully, the temple of the mind is the garden of the mind, and you're replanting the temple of the mind. And there is one place where you said wealth can be created in this way, business, in your companies, etc. Now, when you speak of wealth, or when the author speaks of wealth, do you only name physical, monetary, asset-driven wealth, or is it also social wealth? Because is it also emotional wealth? Is it also spiritual wealth in the act of showing compassion to a colleague, in the act of helping business thrive, or preventing it from going under? So when we speak of wealth, or when the author speaks of wealth, is it what kind of wealth are we talking of? Are we only talking of material wealth, or does the whole range of wealth and abundance,
inner wealth also?
Inner wealth, and there's social wealth, there's emotional wealth. Those will never translate into monetary terms, is what I mean. But does the author indicate towards that as well?
Sanjay.
Yeah,
I don't know if I made myself clear. I'm sorry.
Sorry, could you repeat the last statement?
I'm not sure if my question is clear.
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah, it's very clear. I think I maybe just to add to your first point about scientific materialism, in addition to what Saurabh said, from the way I am starting to understand these things is, there is the equivalence of matter and energy that was talked about more than 100 years back. And I think we still haven't fully internalized it. And that's why we see these things as, being different. In reality, they are not. And that's been proven, but we still don't get it, I think. In terms of wealth, I think it talks about all types of wealth, clearly. It is taking the material wealth as an example, because that's what I think people are looking for in some sense. Yeah, it's more tangible. It's more, it's more measurable. you know, a lot of humanity is focused on it and so on and so forth. But it's obviously referring to creating that wealth in the right way versus the wrong way, right? And the right way is obviously the one that includes all the other labels that you talked about. Clearly, without that, it cannot be the real wealth. It would, I mean, we've seen enough examples of people losing their wealth in something or the other that happens, which looks random, but in reality, it's not. Industries change, individual fortunes change, you know, families go down, businesses go down, and so on and so forth. So, you know, it's not lasting in some sense, but clearly the one that is built rightly, both the wealth and the health, is obviously lasting, if that's one way to differentiate.
I'd like to weigh in with something a bit extra there.
Sure.
It's wealth of, it's absolutely, Sanjay is absolutely right. It's abundance in anything that you care to look at. It's abundance of love, abundance of respect. You know,
That was my query.
for me, actually, I want to share with you abundance of time. I find that, and as Sanjay has hinted, what the Diamond Cutter makes quite clear is that the only way to have wealth of any kind in any future moment is to be giving it away generously in this moment.
In the now, yes, in the present.
And I find that as I give time, which I do on my Wednesdays, I do a lot of volunteering. I find that time appears in my life in miraculous ways to give me the opportunity to do the things I want to do. It's a fascinating idea, and as Sanjay is right, you know, physics cannot explain it. And I've got to tell you, also golf balls. I play golf, and you know, I make it a point to go help somebody I'm playing with, to go and have them find their golf balls when they hit it into the rough. And the more I do that, the less reason I have to actually go and ever buy golf balls. They just miraculously appear in my life. People send me gifts of golf balls. I win a tournament. I get golf balls as a prize. So you know, so it's whatever you give out.
So there's abundance right there. That's abundance right there.
Yeah.
You're being given what you need because you are replanting the garden of your mind with your conscious action.
Is there any room for spontaneity in a life led like this, if it's otherwise too self-conscious about whether we're doing the right thing, about thinking the right thoughts, about planning for good things? Does it leave room for spontaneity? It
Well,
does?
I think the random.
I think it does. Yeah. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well,
you have far more experience. I'm just going to guess the answer, frankly.
I think life is full of surprises, Latika. So the random events that keep happening.
You said there's a reason for everything. Where is it random? There's a reason for everything that happens, no?
No, but I'm saying the way it affects you is not random. What is happening is random, but how it's affecting you is not random at all. I think therein lies the difference. And
they're not random. They're very conscious or subconscious, but they're not random.
May I ask Kaveri to come in? She wants to make a point. Kaveri?
No, I just wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
The one about looking back in meaning. It's a beautiful, I think, the thing that have been put on that particular slide. And there was a lovely quotation which was put over there. What is the context for that? That you look back on all everything that has a cause. It's just beautiful, that particular concept. What was the reason for that being put in there? I think from what I remember, learn to see that everything brought about by causes is like a star, a problem in your eye, a lamp, an illusion. It was just beautiful. So, and it's part of the thing of look back at meaning. So very briefly, just quicker explanation of that, look back at meaning.
Yeah, what I understood, I can definitely mention is that, realizing that everything that starts has an end, and by implication, something that is without a beginning does not have an end, right? So it's the concept of anadi anant versus beginning and end. So life, in that sense, because it had a beginning, the way we understand it, has an end, and then realizing that when that end comes, or when that end is near, what really matters is the things that have, not a fleeting appearance like a star, which only will be visible in the night and not in the day, or a cloud which will move around here and there. So it's really trying to, in my understanding, imply that one can change one's, what one is going to look at from here onwards to the end. If one were to understand, when looking back, what is more important is things that are more permanent, and then focus on those rather than focusing on, let's say, parties, or focusing on gossiping, or so on and so forth, which can we can spend time in that, but it does not have any permanence.
So is that quotation from the Buddha? I mean, it's from one of his
from Buddha. Yeah, absolutely.
One of his teachings. Okay.
Yes, it's
That is from the sutra, from the Diamond Cutter Sutra.
Yes, it is from Diamond Cutter.
I think, Mr. Sanjay Phadke, we have to somehow end now, because we've come to the end of the time given to us. So I haven't got any further questions from other people, though I had a couple. I'm going to keep them aside and maybe just talk to you personally. Thank you very much for having given us and opening the book of something that is relevant, and we don't always realize it, and we don't always stop to think about it. So thank you for doing it. I hope some of us do read this book, and maybe it'll enrich us all. Thank you very much for being present. Good night to all of you.
Thank you, Latika. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
And thanks, Saurabh. On behalf of everybody, let me thank you for staying up so late.
Yes, Saurabh as well.
Saurabh also, both. Yeah.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
So can I just end, Latika?
Yes.
So on behalf of Gyanadab, I thank Sanjay and Saurabh from Australia coming online for us. And it was a very good presentation, Sanjay. I don't know whether people who are there know about Gyanadab. Gyanadab is an NGO working, celebrating literature, art and culture. And we have a very good website. Gyanadab.org is a brand new website which has just been launched by us. Please have a look at the website. I wanted to inform everybody that this program that is being recorded just now is also available on Facebook. And immediately after the program, we'll be putting the link on the book club and various chat groups where our invitations go. Secondly, by Monday, this program will be also on YouTube, duly edited after removing all the unnecessary things that are there. And I want to inform all the people that Gyanadab next Saturday will be having Krishan Chandra. We'll be holding a program under Guldasta Urdu, celebrating the author, writer Krishan Chandra, who's a very famous in Hindi and Urdu. And about the next week's Urdu book, next week's English book, Latika, are you aware what is the next week?
Sapiens, I think. Sapiens.
Folks, it is Sapiens. Okay, the very, very famous book by Yuval Noah Harari. And Ravi Sonalkar will be presenting it.
Fine. So thanks, Moini and Latika. And I think, shall we, with your permission, take leave of everybody?
Yes, we'll call it a day. Good night, everyone. Good night.
And thank you very much, Latika and Farooq.
For taking
over and running it very smoothly.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Satish. Get well.